We got the story from Timcast.com. Intelligence whistleblower says U.S. government has retrieved craft of non-human origin. Official provided Congress with information confirming that multiple agencies are reverse engineering the craft within top secret programs. David Charles Grush, a veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and National Reconnaissance Office, is acting as a whistleblower and says the information on these programs has been illegally withheld from Congress, according to an exclusive report from the debrief. Grush's disclosures reveal that for decades, the U.S. government, acting in concert with allies and defense contractors, has recovered intact vehicles and partially intact vehicles of exotic origin, non-human intelligence, whether extraterrestrial or unknown origin, based on the vehicle morphologies and material science testing and the possession of unique atomic arrangements and radiological signatures.
Does it say when they recovered it?
No, it just says over the past few decades.
Oh, okay. It's like, if this thing crashed just as Biden is getting in trouble with the FBI, then I've got questions. But if it's something
it crashed just behind where the FBI was speaking at their press conference. Look at this. He says the UFO programs have been concealed within multiple agencies nesting. Unidentified aerial phenomena. It's unidentified autonomous phenomena, isn't it?
Yeah.
No. Anomalous.
Anomalous, yes.
Unidentified anomalous phenomena. Activities in conventional secret access programs without appropriate reporting to various oversight authorities. Less than a week before the debrief report was published, NASA held its first ever public hearing on UFOs, where members of a task force created by the space agency discussed findings from their investigations.
Imagine you're the person.
There you go.
We had a public hearing. We had a public hearing. We're out in front of us. This says NASA.
Imagine you're the person who doesn't know any of this is real, but then they come to you to be on the task force, and you're like, and by the way, aliens are real.
It's like every movie ever.
Yeah, it's like somebody has to be there. Just like you get hired, you don't know they're real, and then some dude who works in your department has to come to you and be like, by the way, like aliens are real, and we're going to ask us to work with us on this.
No way.
Crazy.
Everyone who works at NASA thinks aliens are real. You cannot prove that wrong. Everyone is at least open to the possibility if you go work for NASA.
Yeah, but this isn't just NASA. This is other departments in the government, right?
Who was the guest on Rogan? He was on there a couple times, I think, that said that he worked in this department. Do you remember who I'm talking about? Serge. I feel like Serge knows.
Yeah.
You're not talking about that guy from the 90s, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you're talking about.
Yeah, but that story seems to be mostly bunk, if you ask me.
Really?
Yeah, I forgot his name. Do you remember his name?
Trying to rack my brain.
He said he saw a little green man. And then later on, they were like, why did you say this? Like, as a puppet. And it's like, oh, come on, dude. Either it was an alien or it wasn't.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of a different person. I'm not sure, but
yeah, he said he worked in a lab and that they had this like anti-gravity
reverse engineer.
thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if he said he saw a little green man, I don't know.
Remember it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. I'm gonna look it up.
Tom Green?
No.
Everybody,
not Tom Green.
Bob Lazar. There you
Sorry.
go.
Bob Lazar.
Chat's got us covered. They're smarter than we are. So
Yes,
they know.
they have better recollection.
I put Joe Rogan, Little Green Man guest into the search engine. It came up with Tom Green. So I don't know.
What I found interesting about this article is that they said that the main reason that they were disclosing it is because they wanted to prove that it has not been the U.S. that has been suppressing this information for the past 50 years. They said that this is a worldwide phenomenon and that most countries or most governments around the world have the same information and no one's talking about it. And I think that's absolutely fascinating.
Well, isn't that the kind of one of the theories? It's like conspiracy theories are hard to, it's hard to believe in conspiracy theories because the idea that many people could uniformly stay quiet is hard to believe, right? So am I supposed to believe that some nation that wants into the UN and has evidence of aliens isn't going to use that as some type of, leverage point to let us in, or we're going to tell everybody about the aliens that crashed here?
Unless the UN is like, no, we don't talk about the aliens. So if you want into the UN, you don't talk about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Sounds good, we won't.
Yeah, he's saying you blackmail your way into NATO or whatever.
What if the aliens took over a long time ago and everything we think about public life is just orchestrated for the facilitation? It's kind of like, chickens in a chicken coop. You show up, you do the thing. The chickens have no idea what's going on, but you make them think something's happening.
It's a distinct possibility that we've been,
there's no real war. There is a war, but it's being done for some specific purpose. The lockdowns were for some specific purpose.
Yeah, well,
a global event.
A lot of people think that the lockdowns were a product of an effort to be able to cover up the printing press that was necessary, or the printing that was necessary to deal with the
collapse of the financial system.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you look at the monetary charts from the Great Recession from 2008, from the crash, there's a massive spike in the influx of and printing of money, the expansion of the money supply, and then COVID is boom.
Right. Well, there was the reason that people think this is that late 2019, I think it was November of 2019, the overnight lending rate between central banks spiked massively, and that signals oftentimes a contagion event that's happening where no one is trusting anybody to lend money. Basically, you have liquidity dry up, and then you have to turn on the printing press, but you have to have an excuse to do so without the entire economy collapsing. So that's where the COVID rollout. I don't necessarily buy it, but it's an interesting thesis.
So the idea is that it covers up for the fact that there would be panic if they just turned it on for no reason.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, and because you shut down the economy, you essentially you give people a total distraction. You think that you would have never been able to get permission to print. I think it was $4.5 or $5 trillion in 2020. I don't think you could have ever gotten that permitted unless it was like an alien invasion or a pandemic.
Well, that means next time we get the alien invasion.
Honestly, I think it's
hopefully in our lifetime.
We've talked about it that the financial plan was to prevent a hard fall to create a slow fall. So instead of the whole system just breaking overnight and everyone losing their minds, which would destroy everything,
right,
they make it a slow fall and control the descent, and then things are slowly getting worse economically and in cities. But it's better than one day you have a city and the next day you have just riots and the city being burned down.
Well, the persistent inflation that's a product of the lockdowns and the printing that happened in 2020, I don't think people understand how, deleterious, I think that's the word, that is for civilization. To have so many young people that now feel as if they can't afford to ever purchase a home. And they're not wrong, many of them. And I just think that once you have essentially dispirited all of the young men and women, of course, in civilization, it's like, well, then I think that you suddenly...
We appreciate your inclusion.
Yes, I'm very woke. I had to include the lady here. I think that once you've gotten to that position, well, then the potential for wars as distraction increases exponentially because you have so many people that are purposeless and
disenfranchised.
Disenfranchised. It's terrible.
It's like a whole subsect of memes that's like, it says like, my biggest mistake was being in the 3rd grade during the 2008 financial crisis. So I couldn't buy a home.
Yeah.
That's how it is for a lot of people. And I think you're right. Like, it's funny because I'm one of those people whenever I would hear people talk about their annoyances with the boomers, right? Like, go to college and pay for your college on your summer job, which they don't understand that is just not a possibility anymore. I would still get annoyed with the people who are doing that because I'm like, look, I'm not saying that they're not stupid for talking like that and being clearly devoid of reality now, but I do get annoyed when people don't take responsibility for their own actions and just complain about it. But the more this happens, the more you're like, yeah, most of us aren't going to be able to afford a house in our lifetime, and it's just getting worse.
Yeah, and if you can't afford a house, how do you start a family? If you can't move forward in any way, what is to stop essentially civilization from falling apart? And
if you don't have kids, if you don't have a reason to plan for the future or to actually focus on the biggest problems that face us as a people, because you're now thinking about your kids and your grandkids, basically your entire progeny. Well, then you start to have really what's called high time preference behavior, where you start to borrow and live in debt, and you're not so much worried about your health or achievement or starting a business or doing anything. And I think that once you have that formula, well, then America as the leader of the world is essentially a memory.
And Hollywood and all these industries are telling you to live in the now, don't start a family, and just indulge your every whim.
Yeah, it's complete self-indulgence culture. Yeah. But you can understand why, if you are being told, well, go to college and go into massive amounts of debt to never be able to afford anything, to work for soulless companies that don't represent your values and ultimately will chew you up and spit you out. That's not a fun time.
And even if they do represent your values, it's still a soulless corporation that you have no connection to. Why? So you can work your way up to middle management. Fantastic.
And you can be known on the internet and not know anyone around you in your giant apartment complex.
This is why it's so important that in my opinion, the libertarians lead the way in educating as to what central banking does to an economy and to a civilization. And so few people understand it really in depth that they misattribute the blame to capitalism. This is not capitalism. When you have a central bank, by its very nature, you don't have capitalism right away because you have the capacity to control the most important market signal there is, which is both the quantity of currency as well as the interest rate, so the price that you pay for that currency. It's devastating to an economy and ultimately to a culture. And this is a product. This is a trend that has persisted when it comes to central banking throughout Western civilization for thousands of years, and yet, if you bring it up to somebody that's recent college grad, they'll just be like, no, it's the greedy Goldman Sachs. It's like, no. Those dudes are a product of central banking. BlackRock and its $9 trillion is a product of central banking.
Do you think they do that because they're not educated? Like they don't have any kind of financial literacy? They don't understand economics really?
The schools are teaching them differently.
That's really the problem.
The schools.
I think it's that schools don't teach this at all. They prefer to pad their education with like gender expression or whatever else.
Well, I mean, the primary thing, if you get any economics education in academia, it's going to be Marxist leaning, which is always, aiming from Jump Street to undermine and debase what actual free market capitalism is, which is just voluntary trade amongst people. It doesn't really have anything to do with the government at all. But then they manage to essentially suppress any knowledge about central banking and what that creates. Honestly, most of them don't even understand it. I've had Jimmy Dore on my show. We talked about this at length, and I love Jimmy Dore. I think he's brilliant. But when I talked to him about it, he's like, look, I don't understand central banking. And I was like, Jimmy, if you're going to talk about the pitfalls of capitalism and you don't understand central banking, well, we got to go back to square one, brother. Like we got to, because I honestly think that he and RFK and so many of these guys that seem to understand so much of the problems of the world that the libertarians identify too, ultimately their solutions are wrong because they don't understand the root of the problem. And I don't say that as a paternal way or a talking down way. I just mean like, I think that's honestly the issue here and he was at least honest enough to admit it, that he's like, I don't understand central banking.
And a lot of these issues have been convoluted so heavily by the market. Like, also, it's like they blame capitalism, but they don't understand that what they're talking about is actually cronyism.
Exactly.
And in the combination of government and financial institutions.
We exist under an oligopoly in basically every market sector. And that's a product of both regulatory capture as well as essentially a fascistic alliance that exists between these businesses and the government regulators, as well as the central bank.
And aliens.
And aliens, Tim.
Yeah.
I try to point to...
Just trying to rope in the regular people because they're probably been like, I'm not interested in this. Aliens.
It's starting to like tune out.
But the aliens have capitalism. That's what we need to know. What do they use
probably
to pay
understand
for
central banking is the thing.
How do they build those ships?
Aliens brought central banking. That means if you support central banking, you're supporting demons.
Demons from the sky.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it says in the Bible somewhere about not having central banks or something.
Because Tim is a religious scholar.
I'm gonna pivot it a different way to keep people's attention still. If we didn't have central banking, by now we would all be flying in UFOs. So abolish the Fed.
That's why the aliens want us to continue down the path of not understanding central banking. They want to have it for themselves and no one else because they're keeping the UFOs.
Exactly.
Maybe the aliens came here to control everything, to destabilize the economy so that we're forced to end the central banking system.
Sounds good to me.
So they're here to help.
This is going to be a great TV show.
They're like, we must liberate these
it.
people and get rid of their central banks. And then, the governments are
that's
like,
way more optimistic than them just being here to probe me. Because I didn't really want that.
Most of the time when I watch any show with aliens or any movie with aliens and I look at their ship, I'm like, how did they build that ship? Like, that's the number one question I ask. I'm like, they got tentacle arms. I'm like, they can't hold tools.
Yeah.
How do they build the ship? That's what I want to know.
They hold sticks with little fingers on them.
They got 3D printers, I figure, by that point. Like, just massive 3D printers that just 3D print the ship.
This is what always gets me about everything alien. Like, at some point, we can only understand them through the lens of our own understanding of humanity, right? So we're like, how do they build the ship? Like, how do we know on their planet they don't just grow ships? Like, if alien species exist, they're probably so different from us. Like, there was some show, like Hunt for Aliens or whatever, and some guy was like, I worked at Area 51 and I'm very knowledgeable. And he's describing like just weird looking humans. Like, he's saying they walked on 2 legs. Like, why would an alien be the similar shape to us? It doesn't make any sense to me. That's why I really need this to get declassified, because I want to understand. It just sounds like we are trying to read our own humanity into something else.
It's more likely that some dude got drunk and was stumbling home from a bar and then came across a goofy looking dude and was like, whoa, look at the guy. He's got a big head and big eyes. And, whoa, and then he passes out. Then he wakes up a few hours later and he's like, what time is it? And he looks at his watch or his phone and he's like, 2 hours? 2 hours are gone, but I was just at the bar. And then he like tells everybody, it was 2 a.m. and then all of a sudden I blink and it's like 4 a.m. and there was this big headed thing. I swear it must have been an alien. It's like, dude, were you drinking?
He's like, that's irrelevant.
Did you black out? And did you just see some guy with a big head? That's just infinitely more plausible than actually aliens coming abducting people, unfortunately.
And he's like, quick, the Biden family is corrupt. Throw him off my track.
You know what's really crazy? Yeah, right. You know what's really crazy is like, imagine what a duck must be thinking when it lands near a decoy duck. It's just like, this dude duck is like, this chick ain't saying nothing. She's just standing there. Well, this is kind of weird. But I don't know. That's all right by me. And then imagine if aliens did come here, would they have some kind of decoys? Are there like android human decoys that walk around?
Yeah, it's Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, it's the NPCs, those people with no inner monologue that we hear about now that just walk around and they just exist without actually thinking about it.
I honestly think that study has to be wrong because I think people just don't know what it means to think.
Yeah.
Because they have to think.
They're thinking it, they're vocalizing it in their head differently than we are, I guess, would be the best way to.
But the fact that they don't understand it is still concerning to me.
No, of course.
Aiden Paladin did like a really like deep dive breakdown into that study that explained more or less what it meant. But yeah, I still like the idea that there's people that just walk around that just don't think about anything, because I overthink about literally everything as I'm doing. I'm like, I'm going to open the door, I'm like, is it left or is it right? And I'm thinking about this all the way to the door handle, and I'm just imagining people that don't think at all.
It would be a cheat code for like the highest level of meditation if you have no inner monologue, because you're just already in a Zen state.
Yeah.
I've been trying for years. I can't get it done.
Empty your mind. It's like Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah.
Did you watch the new one? They have new episodes.
Oh yeah,
of
they're
Beavis
great.
and Butthead.
They're actually really funny.
And they're meditating, and he's like, you have to empty your mind, enter an enlightened state, and then all of a sudden they just start floating up to like ascending into a higher plane because their brains are empty.
There's nothing there.
And then like they get there and there's like religious figures and great philosophers, and they just like their brains don't work.
People don't know this about Tim, but he does incredible impersonations. You were recapping an entire episode where we were playing poker on Friday of Beavis and Butthead, and I was like, I felt like Mike Judge was in the room with me.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I'm particularly good at Beavis and Butthead.
Oh no, you are. You are.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.